All right, my clock shows 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just wanted to thank everybody for joining another Coup Connect meeting. Today, we are going to discuss how important communication is, and I'm going to give some tips on how to better communicate with your team members, your supervisor, and your coworkers. Not only during remote times like we are right now, but also these tips should also work anytime. As I'm going through my tips, feel free to enter any tips that you might have into the chat box so that myself and others on this call can learn from you guys as well. I think that we can all agree that communication is critical, not only in standard working times, but during these remote working times as well. Communication helps us stay on the same page as our teammates, our coworkers, and our supervisors. And then currently with this added pressure of the unique situation of COVID-19 that we find ourselves in, good communication will help us all stay more productive, efficient, and cohesive in our work. So while we're all adapting to the new work home setting, we're also adapting. Some of us are adapting better than others. If you're not adapting very well, it's okay. You're not alone, and that's why we are here today to talk about how we can better communicate with everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my tips. So the first tip that I have is be proactive in communicating with your team. We no longer see our colleagues. We can't walk down the hall and pop into somebody's office. And so it's the way that we're communicating has changed drastically. Many of us have found out the hard way that we took our normal communication levels for granted. So when we're working from home, we need to be more proactive in keeping the lines of communication open so that no one feels isolated or in the dark. To compensate for this, we all can communicate early and often, lead with transparency, and encourage accountability with our team. Small gestures such as checking in with team members first thing in the morning just to say hello, how are you doing, good morning, or throughout the day just to check in and say hi speaks volumes. So if you're able to do that, if you're already doing that, fantastic. If you're not doing it, try it, see how it works for you and your team. Sometimes we're working different work hours as well. So just checking in to make sure that our coworkers know when we're available and when we're not available is extremely helpful. The second tip is scheduling daily huddles. So if we're scheduling regular calls with our team, our supervisor, whoever it might be, such as first thing in the morning, it allows us to sync up and talk about the day. What are the most critical things that are happening during the day? What do I need to get done? What are my top priorities, and so on. Establishing this consistency helps create certainty and make sure that nobody feels isolated or not know what's going on within their team in these very uncertain times. So it's more important than ever to have these processes in place or create something that works for you and your team so that everybody's focused and on the same page. These daily meetings are also a good time to strengthen connections with your employees and coworkers. And so you could consider, even at the beginning of your meetings, just chatting with people, talk about their personal lives. If you know something's been going on, check in with them, make sure that everything's okay as well. The third tip that I have is setting expectations. So this is critical because we should not be assuming that our team are all on the same page. And it could be in terms of work hours, it could be in work that needs to be done, or what have you. So it's really important to set expectations and outline those expectations so that you're reducing any potential frustration that may be going on, and ensuring that there's a smooth transition with the work that needs to be done, especially while working in the home setting. When possible, encourage employees to work around their most productive times and hours. I know this is not always possible. Some of us need to be in the office our normal 8 to 5 working hours, but if those of you do have a more flexible schedule, it's always encouraged to work around your most productive work hours. So for example, some may want to get up early before their children get out of bed and work a few hours so that they can focus on their children when they get up. Others like to stay up later in the evening and get their most productive in getting their work done later in the evening. But just make sure that you're setting those expectations with your team so that they know what you're doing and when you're doing it. The next one is adopting new tools and technology. I know that in the office, you know, like I mentioned, it's really easy to walk over and talk to somebody, email, phone, things like that. But those aren't your only options to collaborate with team members, especially working remotely. You're not able to do some of that stuff. So I wanted to just kind of highlight a program that WSU has afforded all of their employees. Which is Microsoft Teams. If you guys aren't using Microsoft Teams to its potential, I really encourage you to go out there and do a little bit of research on what Teams has to offer. It offers things such as chat features. So like if you have just a quick comment or question, you can utilize the chat feature. You can also bring others into the chat and have a group chat if that's if you need to have a conversation quickly with lots of folks. Teams also allows users to share and edit files and documents, which is really helpful because you can edit them real time, and as you're editing it, somebody else can edit it, and all those edits will be updated real time. You can also host video calls as well as voice calls. So if you don't have a phone at home, or if you don't want to use your cell phone, you can also use Teams as a feature just to make a quick phone call to a coworker as well. And there's tons of resources on how to use Teams out there. You can just Google. There's tutorials from very basic Teams to, you know, how to log in and how to use the basic features to very advanced features. So I encourage y'all to take some look at that training if you're not comfortable using Teams, because it is a great resource to keep your group connected during these times. The fifth tip is using communication methods the right way at the right time. So we have all these, we just talked about all these different ways that we can communicate via Teams specifically. And so it may be tempting to perhaps write an email and send it out to the entire group. It may take you a long time to write that email or construct that email so it's very clear and concise. But oftentimes when we're doing that, we have the recipient of that email is still receiving a lot of questions, or still has a lot of questions. So, so sometimes just maybe taking a quick 5 minutes to have a phone conversation or a video conference with that particular individual might be more ideal than spending 20 minutes writing an email and then still having to have a meeting for 5 or 10 minutes to explain what you just wrote in that email. So just be smart about how you're communicating with your remote employees, your coworkers, your supervisors, and so on. Instant messaging is a really good tool for just quick, short, to the point questions and comments for somebody. And then messaging is also good for having brief catch-ups with an employee. But then if you have something more substantial, or it's a topic that is open to discussion, you're going to want to maybe have a phone call or a video conference in that situation. The next tip I want to share is allow more lead time for task completion. So considering every single one of us has been required to adopt to new work habits seemingly overnight, while simultaneously having big changes at home, which is, you know, having our kids there, teaching them, being their homeschool teacher, and so on. It's super important to be understanding and make sure that we're giving a little bit of grace in these situations as well. Also, productivity could potentially dip in a work from home environment as well due to all of those distractions that that I just mentioned. And so when it's possible, or if it's possible, try to give a little bit of extra time for projects and assignments that need to be completed, just so that we're ensuring that the expectations are reasonable for the person that are doing these tasks and projects. If you as an employee feel like you're receiving unrealistic timelines, talk to your supervisor. It's really critical that you're over communicating in these times, because it could be one of a couple different scenarios. For example, you may be thinking that a project has a much larger scope than it really has, or your supervisor may not understand the scope of it, and they might be able to change that timeline. So communication is critical in these situations. The last tip that I want to talk about is ask for and give your communication preferences. Not all of us communicate the same way or prefer the same level of communication. So, for example, your manager may prefer to communicate via email, and you might have a colleague who prefers chat or phone. And so just once, you know, talk with your colleagues, talk with your supervisor, and figure out who likes what, and then try to communicate in a way that meets their needs. And then once you guys get going, you may realize that there are more streamlined approaches for communication when tackling certain projects. So be open to adjust and for new ideas and options as well. So for example, when you're working on complex or creative projects that require maybe accessing multiple documents or that require a lot of discussion and feedback, meeting on Zoom or Teams is probably going to be much faster than sending emails back and forth and being completely confused by email strings and where you're at. Those are my 7 tips for communicating during this time. I am looking at chat. It looks like, Erin Hansen from HRS mentions that there's a group within the university that's having daily coffee break meetings in the mornings to connect. That's a fantastic idea. Everybody can grab a coffee, have a conversation about what to expect for the day or whatever it might be. That's a great tip, Erin. Thank you for sharing it. Any other tips, feel free to plug them here into chat. We will stay on for a couple of minutes just to see if anybody does have any tips that might work, that might be helpful for the group. But otherwise, I appreciate everybody joining today. And tomorrow, real quick, I want to let you all know that we have our Zoom meetings every day at 10 o'clock, and Matt McKibben from EH&S is going to talk about ergonomics as we get back into the office. So if you're able to join tomorrow, I'm sure Matt would appreciate that. Other than that, I'm not seeing any chat, any new chat. So thanks everybody for joining. Have a great day.